If you ask most modern and historical sewists which fabric is the most pain to work with, you'll find that Velveteen and its bigger sister Velvet top most of their lists. In fact, the only fabrics that tend to get more hate are knits and other stretchy fabrics. Why? Because it has a pile or nap, which makes it finicky to cut, difficult to work with, and almost impossible to iron. Let's face it, Velveteen throws more tantrums than a 3-year-old. So why do we use it? Because it's pretty. And naturally, when I was searching for affordable alternatives to wool coating to make a new, gorgeous 1890s winter coat, guess where I went without any hesitation? Yep, the toddler of all fabrics. And when I got it, guess what I hadn't noticed before? It has stretch. You know, because tailoring a garment wasn't hard enough already. Oh well, I'm gonna use it anyway, and it's going to be fabulous. Before we have fun with the Velveteen, first we need to mock this up. Black Snail assumes that you're reducing 1.5 inches at the waist and only at the waist. So they have taken that width out of the pattern. So when you're looking at the size chart on the back, the waist measurement is not actually the waist measurement of the final garment, but only at the waist. There are a million different reasons why I have issues with this, but for the sake of this project, just know that I added that width back. I also shortened the torso to make up for my short waist and extended 2 inches at the top of the pattern to compensate for my bustial disproportions. Now, let's cut this out of muslin. The battery on my mic died, and instead of subjecting you to the atrocious audio, here's the quick and dirty. The bust extension didn't work because, unlike my usual lower necklines, I extended the width at the neck instead of at the actual bust. Whoopsies. I let out the sides a little bit and extended at the back shoulder because the shoulder seam was way far back and it was kind of choking me. But I was correct in thinking I needed at least 1 inch in the center front to compensate for my bust, so I'm gonna go ahead and slash and spread to make up that width. Better, but not perfect. There's still a gap right here. One thing that makes this fabric so hard to work with is the nap. It's directional. So I cut a piece and turned one upside down so I had a visual guide. The camera's not picking up the difference, but it's definitely there. All the adjustments have been completed. I put on my mock-up several times using different supports, and it seems to be okay. I may give myself an extra 1/4 inch just on the side seams, just in case. In the long run, it's a coat. It's better if it's too big than it is too small. So to alleviate my anxiety a little bit, I'm going to try and cut out all of the mindless pieces today. That's basically all of the interfacing and stuff like that. That doesn't really matter. The fit's not going to change it any. So I'm going to try and knock that out today in hopes that maybe I can do the hard stuff tomorrow and my brain's a little fresher and I've had time to sleep. With that being said, I have counted a total of 58 different pieces that I have to cut out of, I think, 6 different fabrics. Is that right? Lining, other lining, interlining, hair canvas. Yeah, 6 different fabrics. To make this a little bit easier, I spent a considerable amount of time listing out everything by type of fabric because I find that Black Snail's cutting layouts and their descriptions on the patterns can be kind of confusing. And they also don't include pattern pieces for things that are just straight strip rectangles. And so it can be easy to forget pieces because they're on the list, but they're not on the cutting layout. I just looked at myself in the viewfinder and realized I forgot to take my mustache off from the last bit I filmed. Oh well, I don't care if you don't. There's also a lot of doubling up of pattern pieces like this one, where the grayed out area is the interlining and the wider area is the fashion fabric. I'm opting to cut this piece in 2 instead of on the fold so I can save a little of the horsehair, which is pricey and necessary. I decided to trace this piece rather than cut the paper and did the same for the front interfacing. Now this, my friends, is a sleeve. So I've been dithering about this for a good hour and 15 minutes, trying to convince myself that I'm good to cut this fabric. This is more nerve-wracking than cutting that really nice silk for my Angelica gown. I don't know why, other than the fact that there's a lot of room for error here. Well, Velveteen is a little bit easier to work with than velvet. There are a lot of rules that you still have to follow. This is cut with nap, so everything needs to be in the same direction. I have decided to cut everything with the nap facing down. I think it looks a little bit nicer. I also decided to cut everything flat on the right side instead of trying to fold it. So here's the cutting layout I have so far for just the bodice. I'm only worrying about the bodice today. I have plenty of room to cut the skirt and the sleeve. Before you cut this stuff, make sure that everything is going in the same direction. Well, y'all, I'm stupid. One of the reasons it didn't want to close in the front, I forgot to move the outside button line over when I extended the pattern during the bust adjustment. No wonder it was an inch too narrow. So I measured the distance between each button and subtracted the amount of paper in the center to get the real distance each button should be. Then I transferred the new lines onto the center front of my jacket. Yeah, that fits way better. The pattern calls for polished cotton for the back and side back inner lining, but this is good quality muslin, so I'm opting to use what I have. Once those pieces are interlined, it's finally time to assemble the back. This is a very fussy seam. The trick is to ease in the extra toward the top, so I made a point of arranging the pins so I was sewing bottom up for both sides. One nice thing about Velveteen is it's not slippery, which means you only need to pin a lot on the curves, which is good because pin marks will show on the outside, so make sure you're using fine silk pins and trying only to pin within the seam allowances. Another finicky thing about Velveteen is because of its pile, a lot of people say not to iron it without a velvet board, but that's not true. You just need to be careful. Don't apply a lot of pressure and make sure you stay on the wrong side. On a tailored garment like this, it's 100% necessary to press, and velvet boards are like $100. The pattern does say for any size 14 and up to clip open the darts so they lay flat, but I'm against clipping darts because once they're clipped, they're there forever. So I'm opting to iron the darts out toward the side seam instead. Now the front inner lining, which is made out of hair canvas. The pattern suggests pinning the hair canvas and then hand basting it in multiple directions. I recognize the logic behind this, but she was using wool and I'm using Velveteen, which shows sewing lines. I was okay for the roll lines and the center fronts since those will be covered, but I don't want the stitches showing on the center front, so we're only pinning along the seam allowances. The instructions also say to cut out the dart before pinning. I regretted cutting it as soon as scissors hit fabric, because look, they don't line up. The smarter way to do it is to baste on the hair canvas first and then carefully cut up following the line of the dart. When pinning this, make a point to stretch out the fashion fabric to accommodate for the 3D-ness of your body. Don't worry that the canvas doesn't lay perfectly flat right now. Next, it was time to prep the lapel for pad stitching. You want to start 3/4 of an inch before the roll line and then continue on the other side of the roll line all the way to the point. These lines are about 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter apart, and so are the cross lines. If you're an experienced pad stitcher, you may not need to mark the lines permanently, but y'all, it helped me so much. Pad stitching. First rule of pad stitching, do not knot your thread. All right, we want this to be as invisible as possible. As you can see, I've got every stitch marked. They are staggered, so each line is centered between the opposite side here. And instead of normal sewing where you kind of dig in here and then you go up like that, with pad stitching, you want to stick your needle directly down like this. Boom. Until you feel the tip of the needle with your finger on the other side, and then you want to just move it back up. So what this does is creates a very, very tiny stitch that's almost invisible from the outside. From there, we're going to leave a little tail here. We're not going to knot it or anything. We're just going to move on. If you're right-handed, haha, you're going to be confused by this. Lefties, have fun because there is no other tutorial on pad stitching for left-handed people. Maybe I'll do a separate video for it. On one side of this line, you're gonna make your stitch and come up the other side. Down and up. And you're just gonna move on like that. You wanna make sure with this specifically that you are rolling it against your fingers as you're moving, because that is what is going to create the shape. That is what is going to help our collar roll backwards. Okay, if you just do it flat without doing anything, you're not gonna get the shape that we want. And then when you get to the top, you'll just come back down this way and keep going, keep rolling it as you go. So here is the completed pad stitching. Here's what it looks like on the back. Here's what it looks like on the front. As you can see, the stitching is barely visible. And it wants to roll back already without much assistance at all, which is the point. Next, we need to trim back the hair canvas behind the stitching line. Once it's trimmed, take some 1/2-inch twill tape, otherwise known as bridle tape to tailors, and place it over the hair canvas before the roll line and sew it down. Then place another length starting right at the collar notch and working out over the lapel and down the center front. Here's it all sewn down and the canvas catch stitched around the dart. Now you want to pin the shoulder seams together, but with the canvas pulled back away from the seam. Then sew the seam with the tape across it to prevent stretching. No indication where to put the tape, so I opted for kind of right below the seam-ish. Again, take your time and press your seams. Next, we're going to pad stitch the under collar, not to be confused with the under butler. Note that some of this goes in the direction of the roll line and then the rest radiates out toward the edges. If you're working with normal fabric, this isn't so tricky, but we've got Velveteen. So press in the roll line, but be very gentle about it because we don't want a visible crease on the outside. We just want to coax the fabric into rolling. Now's a good time to make sure you've got your collar notch marked on everything. Starting at precisely this point, pin the under collar to the neckline. Stitch, stopping and starting at, you guessed it, the collar notch. Next, sew the front facing to the jacket front with right sides together. Now, snip right here. Snip! Trim the seam allowance down to 3/8 of an inch and clip the curves. This is a weird technique I've never done before, where you fold the seam allowance over and stitch it to the inner lining. When you turn it out, this makes the facing roll inward on its own. Pretty nifty. Instructions say to baste this together, but with the Velveteen, I decided just to pin it. Next, clip the facing seam allowance and turn it inward. Baste it in place by hand. Add the collar piece, making sure to meet right at the collar notch. Pin the sides and the top, but not the bottom. Once everything is trimmed, give the seam allowance the same treatment as the bodice facing. Turn it out! Then baste the top and roll line and hand stitch the seam allowance to the back of the coat. Well folks, that is the hard part done. This whole entire time I've been working on this coat, it's been frigid outside, and now for the next 2 weeks we're gonna be getting 60-degree weather. Even if it is too warm to wear my coat, at least it's warm enough for me to put my Christmas decorations away. One quick thing to note if you're using this pre-quilted fabric, you need to make sure that you edge finish this whether or not you have a serger, because the filling wants to escape out of any cut edge. After basting the dart, turn in the outside edge of the lining. Pin it over the edge of the facing and hand stitch it down with a herringbone or catch stitch. At the shoulder, pin it and the inner facing to only the seam allowance and, per the instructions, just baste it. So I got all excited, I hand sewed all of my lining down and I put it on and half my hand stitching popped off. Yay. So I sat back down the next night and hand sewed it back on, and last night I put it on once again to fit it, and as I was taking it off, all of the stitches popped off again. I've never had this problem before. I think it has to do with the stretch of the fabric. I really wish I had taken the time to look at the fiber content, because this really should not be made with anything that's stretch. But it's what I could afford and it's gonna look pretty when it's done, so it is what it is. I understand why we're supposed to hand stitch all of the lining. It makes it much easier to take apart if you need to alter it. But in this particular case, it's just not gonna work. So last night I put my foot down and I sewed the side seam of the lining by my machine. I'm gonna let it float in there. The center fronts are going to have to be what they are. I think I won't have as many issues with that piece because we're gonna put buttons in there. We're gonna sew the skirt down and I think it'll be okay. Now it's looking a heck of a lot better. But despite the fact that on her blog, she's got this described as a 1980s jacket, it's an 1890s jacket, and these arm size should not be giving me Paula Abdul shoulder pads, okay? Sleeve mock-up. I thought I would test it before I cut on the shoulder. So I put it on first without modifying the shoulder. The sleeve was down here. So I went ahead and marked my little shoulder point and I just pinned it up and folded it, and instantly I had so much more mobility in my shoulder. I was right in thinking I'm gonna have to cut this up about 2 inches. I've also run into a small snafu. This was a silk habit tie I had that I was going to use for the lining of the skirt, but I only have a yard of it. Even with cutting the skirt in half, I still don't have enough fabric. It's a circle, they take up a lot of fabric. I should have known, but I just didn't want to spend any more extra money. I've got 3 yards of undyed silk habit tie just in my stash for whenever I need it. So this is what I'm gonna use. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of acid dye colors that really go with this. Most of the colors I have are pinks and purples and reds. So I had the choice of teal green or peacock blue. So I'm gonna go with peacock blue. We're gonna have an emergency dye sesh, and yeah, guess we're gonna tackle that. I've already started editing this and I'm starting to get concerned about getting it down to a palatable length. So since adding in the skirt is pretty simple, let's do it as an 80s montage. Cue the fit. Cue the tunes. For my regular viewers who are looking at this thinking, okay, but where's the trim? Where's the sparkle? Well, eventually this is going to be the coat for a Lady Sturmhond historical cosplay from the 2nd season of Netflix's Shadow and Bone. But I actually wanted to get a chance to wear this coat, and given the fact that we only get about 6 weeks of cold weather here where I live, I decided to make the coat now, and then we're going to embellish it at a later date. This is what my high school self would have called Band-Aid box blue. Is it the color I wanted? Hell no, but we're gonna live with it. I want to say a huge thank you to all of my supporters over on Ko-fi. It's only because of you that I was able to purchase the fabric for this coat. From here on out, I am pretty much completely crowdfunded as far as fabric goes. Donations are never accepted, but they are always appreciated. And even if you can't, just by liking this video or popping down to the comments to say hi, you're helping me support this channel and keep it running. These pleats were a nightmare to figure out. There's nothing online, nobody explains it in a way that made any sense to me. The instructions sure don't explain it in a way that makes sense to me. Here's how I figured it out. Thought it would be easier if all my pins were different colors. Here's my center. We're gonna radiate everything in towards the center. So we're gonna start out making a normal knife pleat. Okay, we're gonna take yellow and we're gonna fold it in to green. Normal knife pleat. So now we're gonna make another pleat underneath it. We're gonna take white and go to pink so that the blue meets the yellow. So it looks like this. So now we're gonna go towards this white one. We're gonna make a normal knife pleat. So we're gonna go white to white, normal knife pleat. And then we're gonna make a knife pleat underneath it by taking yellow to green. And then again, red to green, light pink to yellow. So these are all going boop, 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 this in this direction. Now for the other side, blue to green, regular knife pleat. Now we're gonna make a knife pleat underneath it. We're gonna take teal to white. And then again, we're gonna move this way. Knife pleat. Knife pleat. Knife pleat. Under knife pleat. The end is in sight, folks. The sleeves are basted in. I had to take up a further inch after I cut it, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with the way that the sleeves look. So I'm gonna go ahead and get them sewn in. I will be doing it by hand because I'm concerned about my sewing machine and the amount of fabric that's right here. For those of you who witnessed the needle gate of December of 2023, you'll understand I still have a little PTSD about sewing with the sewing machine through thick stuff. Otherwise, all that's left to do is deal with the sleeve lining. I'm just gonna put it together the way that I intuitively think because I don't really understand her instructions and she only shows the smaller sleeve. So home stretch, y'all! To finish off the sleeves, turn up the hem allowance of the coat and sew to the canvas. Then turn under the sleeve lining and hand stitch down. You'll want to really stretch the fabric out as you do this to give yourself extra ease. Hand stitch the batting sandwich into the sleeve, making sure to only catch the seam allowance. This gives the sleeve some extra oomph. Run some basting stitches at the top of the lining and gather the arm side to fit. Note that this quilted fabric is really thick and this did not go as fast or as easy as one would have liked. Generally, I don't like to faff about with hem basting, especially when hand sewing a hem, since I usually just make little tucks where needed. But this skirt is a little too long to flatter my stubby legs, and to my knowledge, the Victorians and early Edwardians liked a thicker hem or facing, so I decided to self-face this like the sleeve cuffs, using the hem basting to gather the ease together. I'll then stitch this by hand and sew the lining over it like the rest of the skirt. Added bonus, the bright clashing blue won't be as visible. Last thing to do is add the buttons. I marked the top and bottom of where I wanted the buttons to go, then measured between them and placed the third button in the center. I was very confused by this, and it was not explained well in the instructions at all. There are only 4 buttonholes on this jacket. 1, 2, 3. These get buttoned to this row of buttons here on the left side of the jacket, like that, which means that these 3 buttons are just fake. They're just there for decoration. Instead, you're supposed to sew a button on the underside here and then sew a buttonhole right here and button that on the inside to reduce strain. However, that is literally the fullest part of my bust, and buttoning that there would absolutely cause strain. I left the button here just in case I ever want to change something, but since this velveteen is so grabby, it stays shut just fine with the 3 buttons. All right, I'm calling her done. Y'all, this was a struggle from start to finish. The stretch just kicked my butt, and I'm still learning the skill of tailoring. But wow, am I excited to wear this coat. I'm pretty sure that I'm probably not going to get a chance to wear it until at least early October, but at least I have it done on the off chance we get a random freeze in the middle of February. If you enjoyed this video and want to catch another fun 1890s make, why not check out the video right here on the screen? That's about it for me, folks. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in my